that I dove into Steve Jobs' biography by Walter Isaacson, and then that was like another thing, right? Where Steve is just like, Steve is you, like Steve, whoever's watching this, like Steve is you in every capacity you can possibly think of yourself. Like Steve was, from like doing drugs, Steve was a baby daddy, Steve was an asshole, Steve was all of these things, but Steve was also great, and he was someone who pushed through with dreams and all these things. And his description of acid was incredible because he just was like, hey, like, the most important thing I've ever done in my life. I'm like, dude, you made the iPhone, you made the iPod, my guy, you made the iMac. Like, you're there, you know what I mean? But to say that that's one of the most important things that you've ever done, that definitely piques my interest.
Let's get it started.
Double O. Think like a rapper.
Yeah. Check 1 2. Welcome to episode 105. Think Like a Rapper, the podcast. I'm your host, Double O, in quarantine like everybody else in these strange times. But hopefully through it all, we'll be able to provide sound content that I think will be helpful, and if not, at least entertaining through all this stuff that we got going on. Even before the lockdowns and the quarantines and the self-isolation, as I've gotten older, there's been this journey to really explore inward, to really dig deep and spend time with yourself and make some really important decisions on who you think you are versus who you actually are, and how full of shit you might be. And so I wanted to sit down with one of my homies. You know him as Donnis. He's a rapper signed to Atlantic Records some years ago. About a decade ago, exactly, he was on the cover of the Freshman XXL cover. But that's only the start of the story. Oftentimes we see signing the big deal, going on big tours, which he has with Wiz Khalifa and Bruno Mars, and also my group Kids in the Hall. That's the pinnacle, that's the peak, that is as good as life can get. But what we will discover with Donnis, and what we will discover as we all spend this time to truly sort of turn inward through a variety of ways, whether it be meditation, psychedelic exploration, or simply just sitting in silence by your damn self, that there's always more to go. As Donnis went through that wormhole, he realized there was much more to him than simply being a rapper on Atlantic Records. And so I wanted to explore that journey. We talk about 10 years since XXL Freshman cover, the big difference between being an artist versus being an entertainer, and if there's a way to properly use drugs, set and setting, as they would say, to really unlock parts of yourself in the mind that you didn't know existed. In this time, I've also decided, at first I felt it was a little early, but I want to make sure that I can continue to provide you guys the content that you seem to appreciate. And so I started a Patreon page for Think Like a Rapper. And so if you enjoy the content and you can spare anything, go to patreon.com/GODOUBLE0, go double O, and donate so we can keep this shit going. Cause it costs time, it costs energy and random Amazon package to make sure we can provide you high quality, great sounding podcasts. But here we go. Donnis, Think Like a Rapper. Let's follow Alice down the rabbit hole. What's going on? It's Double O, and we are back with another episode of Think Like a Rapper. And I'm here with the first rapper since I've actually changed the name of the podcast.
Wow.
My homie, my damn near next door neighbor.
Yeah, man.
Ladonnis Crump, a.k.a. Donnis. What's going on, man?
Chilling, man. Thank you for having me on How to Think
no.
Like a Person that I once was, I guess forever a rapper. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the whole theory of it is there's so much that I feel like we've learned and continue to apply that we learned in the industry and learned on the pursuit of becoming artists, of, becoming part of the culture.
For sure. It's your school of hard knocks.
Yeah, and it still applies to everything outside of it. And I think it is very much a great teacher, because on the bad side, it's so fucked up, and all those things. But on the good side, there's so much that you can. I had Jason Rodriguez on it a few weeks ago, and the thing that he took that he learned the most from hip hop was brotherhood. And it's how he takes it and he applies it every job that he goes to, and building his small cipher essentially to kind of keep the culture going at every one of these media entities. And it was something that, part of the doing
Jason's
the
so
podcast.
cool. That was cool to hear.
Yeah, well, it's it's just one of those things that I think is really important to let people know. Sometimes we see the unintellectual side of the culture exploited often by mainstream media, and so this is kind of a way in which we
it's the inner workings. The inner workings of what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, which there's bad inner workings and there's good inner workings. It's really cool to hear someone say that like brotherhood is something that they learned within that space. I'm trying hard to think like what is what is.
We'll get there. You can't get that yet. That question will happen at the end.
Oh, okay, cool. I get to hold on to that.
You get to hold on to it, let it marinate.
The next 40 minutes, it's mine.
I wanted to start with you in a different place than a lot of other people I start with. If you don't know already, Donnis was, always will be a rapper, a music artist from Atlanta.
Jonesboro, Jurassic Park.
And you came to prominence, at least mainstream, really started taking notice when you were on the cover of
Double XL
in 2010. And from that, you've had a very interesting journey, to me, much more interesting than the journey to become a rapper, because that's one of those things that's always talked about. It's like there's always a serendipitous random moments that talk that, but we don't often talk about kind of like what happens next. So after the cover, you put out a Fashionably Late, right?
Yes.
And put out a few other mixtapes. You were doing a bunch of different side projects and things like
Working
that.
with Fool's Gold and dropping things on my own.
And then you disappear.
Yeah, I did that.
So let's this is where we go. What was the thought process like in making that decision? That like there's this thing that people often have, this idea of like sunk costs, right? It's like, oh, I went to law school for 4 years, so I guess I got to continue to be a lawyer because I put in all that work previously.
Yeah.
And so like you had gotten kind of the, you won the lottery to an extent. You got the major label deal. You had the cover. You have. I was actually thinking about when I was preparing for this that you are possibly like the last hipster rapper.
Yeah, maybe.
Because you had existed in a world where you had Fool's Gold on one side, and you were able to do, hang out with Diplo, A-Track, and the burgeoning EDM scene. But then you also were on tour with Bruno Mars, and you also, but you took all of that and you turned your back on it. So what was the decision to do?
Never turned my back.
Okay.
I never turned my back. Hip hop continues to take care of me. You know what I mean? And love me the same way I loved it when I was 3 and 4 and 5 and to now. You know what I mean? So definitely took a stance in a space where it was like, hey, like what is it that I want for myself? I started to look at things under almost like a microscope, where it's like, yeah, I'm an artist. I love writing. Like my favorite place to be was in the studio for a long time. It was like I wouldn't leave the studio. I would stay in the studio for 4 or 5 days at a time and just record, watch people come in and out, sleep there, shower there, and that was the energy. To a place where it's like now I'm on the road and I'm with Bruno Mars and I'm with Wiz and I'm with all these peers, and I'm on the road and I'm just like I wasn't really feeling it. It's like a lot of, there's a difference between an artist and an entertainer. Yeah. And I always will be an artist. I'm not an entertainer. I'm not here to I don't carry that notion well. I don't carry that term well. I'm just like, I don't know.
What about it turns you off?
Just it doesn't for a lot of people it is organic. For me, it wasn't an organic thing, right? It would be like me sitting down and like literally writing a screenplay on how I'm going to do this thing and how I'm going to do that thing, and like it really wasn't. It didn't speak to me the way that a different type of life was speaking to me. It was like, I've experienced so much. Like prior to me coming into the rap space, I was in the Air Force. And which is a very disciplined space to rap where there is no discipline, you know what I mean? And it's just a little wild for the most part. And, I got to experience all those wild things and do all these cool things. And then I was like, I'm cool. I'm literally cool. Like a lot of the relationships and the way people were treating each other and the way I was becoming, I didn't really rock with that. So I felt like in my life, it was okay for me to push a hard restart or go for the things that I wanted, which were very simple things. Like I was like, I just want to be around like my best friends. I want to have favorite restaurants again. I want to do these things. How do I slow this train down? And that's what it was. It was me slowing the train down. I left New York. I went to San Francisco, continued to record, be able to have all these things. And then, like San Francisco does, the Bay Area does, things get real hyphy real quick. They get cool real quick. They get trippy real quick. And, I had my first acid trip, and that was kind of like it. It was like a path was drawn out for me, and it was like, where do you want to go? Do you want to go this way or do you want to go that way? And I chose that spiritual kind of route of
describe
self.
That, because I think obviously, especially in drugs and hip hop, all drugs, because it's just one word to describe it, right? Mm-hmm. Gets a really bad rap. But if you were to talk to Steve Jobs, if you were to talk to that era of Silicon Valley, they all did acid.
Yeah.
And they all attribute a certain understanding of the world to having done that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a huge part of my journey, reading Ram Dass, him as just a guru and a teacher was with his book Be Here Now it just moved me in a crazy way. And then after that, I dove into Steve Jobs' biography by Walter Isaacson. And then that was another thing, right? Where Steve is just Steve is you. Steve, whoever's watching this, Steve is you in every capacity you can possibly think of yourself. Steve was, from doing drugs. Steve was a baby daddy. Steve was an asshole. Steve was all of these things. Mm-hmm. But Steve was also great. And he was someone who pushed through with dreams and all these things. And, his description of acid was incredible because he just was hey, the most important thing I've ever done in my life. I'm like, dude, you made the iPhone. You made the iPod, my guy. You made the iMac. You're there. You know what I mean? But to say that that's one of the most important things that you've ever done, that definitely piques my interest as a youth who is looking up to you as this person who's achieved so much and done so much. So to hear him say something like that, and then I'm probably messing it up, but I paraphrase it, but he talks about Bill Gates, and he's well, Bill Gates would have never had to steal my ideas if he would have done acid. And it's dang, homie, that's how you send shots? That's some Drake, Meek Mill stuff, bro. That's it can get real ugly real quick out there in the streets, man. So it's to hear people in Silicon Valley saying things talk greasy like that. It's it kind of it takes you to another place and makes you want to kind of dive into that world, and it didn't.
So what did you experience when it first happened?
My first acid trip was, you get the visuals, you get the tree breathing, the things of that nature. I think all in all, what I got was a bit of self. A dose of self, right? Being truly placed in reality right here, right now. A dose of hey man, you are an individual. That's what I got. And from that, I began to take, I think, myself a little more seriously on like the things that like I wanted, what was speaking to me, what like moments truly felt like, and how I can begin to navigate these spaces while, you know, trying to center and ground myself.
And how did that then kind of point back towards, because for a while you stopped making music. Was it because of that, or because you felt like, oftentimes people talk about, oh, in order to move forward, you have to, you have to kind of destroy whatever version of yourself it was that kind of got you there to that point?
Yeah, a little bit of that, I think. For me, I would say I'd been making music since I was like 14. I was like, my girlfriend was older. She had a car. I would just go to the studio, be in there with like random ass dudes that I've never met, just smoking hella weed. They're smoking hella weed. I wasn't even smoking at the time. I was 14 and just trying to figure out what a course was, figure out what all this was. And at a certain point, it was just like, damn, like, I was dating a young lady and she was like all about surfing and outdoors and all these things. And like, I would have her trapped in these studio walls like all the time. Right. And, I think I just began, along with like, the space I was playing in and all that, I just began to understand that like, yo, man, like there are other things out there. There is more to life than just like you being a rapper. Right. Like you are also just like an individual. You can like all these things, right? And I was just so pushed and so focused, and that's what it takes to get to that space and that level where I was. It takes that type of focus and all those things. But I think that I just like, my mind just opened up in a space where it was like, I'm touring, I'm doing these things, and I'm getting to see all these cities and all this stuff, but like I wasn't like able to like really see those cities. I was like getting into the city, and then it was like, oh, time for sound check, because we already late for sound check. Do sound check. And then you got to shower because you was probably on the bus and you didn't get to shower or whatever it was. And then you're showering and then you got to get to the show if you're opening the show or whatever it is. And like, then it's payout. You got to do all these things. And then the next thing you know, you got to leave because you got to be to the next city for the next thing, right? So it's like you seeing this success and you're able to do all these things. But for me, like, I think the path has always been more of a space of, if you've ever read The 4-Hour Work Week, like that's my type. That's the type of energy and time I'm on. Like I never want to feel like I have to do this, I have to do that. I want to be doing things. And at a certain point, it felt like I was like having to do things, and it was like a big responsibility on me because like you start getting that level of money or whatever, you start taking care of certain people and all that. It's not something that like it's like, oh, I ran away from or you can't handle it or whatever. But when you're doing something that I would say is like a false identity to what you want to be doing, at some point it's going to catch up to you, whether it's now or later.
And is the identity false because it just no longer rings true? Like, was it always false?
No. I think that it's like, I love being a creative. Like some people are meant to just paint. That doesn't mean that you need to have a reality show on painting and like now you need to like run the road and like be man on road and painting every day in a new country, in a new city and all these things. And like, and especially just like as a young Black youth, like running your own business basically and just putting trust into people that like you don't really know, whatever it is. And now you're like in this space of learning all these things and still like you're a youth and you're learning a lot about yourself, right? And it's like asking questions and being not shy and not having anxieties and all these type of things. And a lot of people out here, you know what I mean? A lot of people in the industry are predators to things like that. They're like, oh shit, they just see an opportunity and they'll wring you dry. And like, you have to learn how to navigate that space. And like, I don't come from a musical family. I don't come from a music business family. I don't come from a business family at all like that. You know what I mean? Like, I come from a military family. So it's like a whole nother avenue of things that I have to learn. I had to learn and I had to learn them quickly. And, rap has taught me a whole lot of great lessons like through that. You know?
I think the biggest, one of the biggest lessons that I know I've learned is that, for example, coming through the military, there's order and there is
chaos.
But then in terms of like promotions, in terms of being awarded a certain sort of pat on the back or like knowing that the work you're doing is sort of being recognized,
acknowledged. Yeah,
it happens in a very sort of regimented way. Whereas like the music industry at large, hip hop especially, is this weird, very chaotic space that you have no clue the work that you do is being heard, seen, recognized, felt. The stuff that you love, people don't like. The stuff you didn't like, people love. And you get really thrown around in trying to, I tell people that the one benefit that I love of being an artist is that we go through a midlife crisis every 6 months because you're constantly having to reassess yourself, your identity, and just be like, am I full of shit? Do I actually know what is, what this thing is? Do I know what I'm even doing? Like any of those sort of things. And it felt like, at least at that point, you were kind of going through that. So then what was the next step for you once you had the acid trip, once you decided that the spiritual sort of path was what you wanted to do? What was the first step?
Yeah, it wasn't like a crazy immediate thing. It was, still a lot of music, still a lot of, exploring and experimenting. I wouldn't say it was like this like crazy immediate thing, but I will say that after SF, then I went to SF and I studied music theory. I did all these things still in the music space because like I'm still passionate about it, right?
Yeah, you dug in because you dug in not just in terms of like...
Yeah, I was still on tour with like A-Track and stuff.
Yeah,
while
and
this
then
was
you
happening.
dug into production, like in a real way. What made you say, oh, let's see what the other side of the fence sort of looks like?
Well, it's like, it wasn't even really the other side of the fence. It was just at some point in middle school, like I used to be on Fruity Loops every day, and then I just stopped that at some point, right? Like some dickhead said something about one of my beats, and I was like, oh, I'm not doing this anymore. Fucking child. But it's like, it was just me going back to the roots of just making things that I really loved and cared about. And I think during that time, being locked in like that spot in Soma, out in SF, it was like I made some of the best stuff that nobody will probably ever hear. It's just like me locked in a room, producing for myself, making for myself, creating for myself, like I did when I was 15 and all those things. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like that's the best feeling ever, right?
Yeah, it often is. I was telling this to someone once that like the key to life, if you can try to do it, is to always try to be your best 7-year-old self.
Yeah.
There is a version of you before a lot of the external sort of no's and pressure come in and say, oh, you should be doing this. You should be doing this because you look like this, or because you're this. You should be that. You should be that. When before that, you were just like, man, I wanted to be a architect and
It reminds me of, I don't know the exact lines, but when Ye is on Power, where he's like, my childlike creativity is being grounded by these growth thoughts. It's like that's what it is. It's trying to hold on to your child. Yeah. Your childlike creativity, your childlike sensibilities, all those.
Because that is where freedom is very much.
1,000%.
And you found that in that room.
Without question.
So you're locked in a room, like Ye for,
doing
whatever,
the thing.
Out beats.
Yeah, and then I had a really close friend named June Joe, who's like I met through music and stuff. Runs a crazy brand called Information. They're huge, and he was like, "Yo, you should come out to Hawaii," and I was like, hell yeah, I should come out to Hawaii. So I went to Hawaii, and like that was just another level of it, right? It's like really getting away from all the stuff, right? Like it would be a whole nother story if I stayed in New York or whatever it was, right? Because like it was that type of hustle, it was that type of grind. But I was like unwinding and unwinding and unraveling and unraveling. So going to Hawaii and being able to do the same in Hawaii, dropping acid on the beaches of Hawaii, surfing, doing all of these things that I had never experienced before, in like a time space that is like just truly slowed down. Yeah. And I'm like hours and hours away from what's truly happening here in the US or whatnot. And so I spent that time, and then I was like, okay, I'm cool. Then I went to LA, Worked with K-Tronada a little bit. I was like really on the dance wave, doing things of that nature, recording, and still experimenting, right? Like I wanted to I was like, yo, I was never able to like sing and do pop stuff or write pop stuff. I want to like prove to myself I can do those things. Working with K-Tronada and Alex Goose and these guys, because I still needed to express myself. I still needed to
100%.
figure out, because like music is just, I always love music. Like this just is what it is.
When you were in Hawaii, was it difficult to slow down? Was it difficult to adjust to that sort of idea of like, oh no, this is maybe how life is. Like, maybe this is the pace. It wasn't.
It was like every moment Hawaii is showing you that Hawaii is bigger than you. And it's this beautiful place. And it's just like every corner you turn, you're just like, oh God, like it's just picturesque. It's like all these amazing things happen. I mean, a big lesson that I learned there, which I share with people, is that like Hawaii taught me no matter where you are, there you are. Like you can't run away from who you are, right? So it's like you have to do the inner work. You can like leave and hop from state to state. You could be like, like I hate LA, I'm leaving, I'm going to Houston, or I'm going here. It's like it doesn't matter if you're not doing the inner work. You know what I mean? You're just gonna be that same anxious,
the same person everywhere.
Shitty person like that you were in Cleveland or whatever it is, right? So for me, it's, you know, it was a place that taught me that, showed me that, and then, you know, it was kind of like, all right, let's like buckle in and like really do, how do we do the deeper work, right?
Yeah.
And like try to sort out who we are, because we never took that time, right? It was like military being told what to do all the time, to music, which is like, oh, you know, you love music, you know, you love these things, but like from like, some people find themselves really early. But like for me, it was like high school, military, famous rapper, and it's like what is going on? So like, so when do you have time to like just like be like, I'm just me.
Here.
Let me just be me. I'm not like trying to be cool because of high school. I'm not having to like deal with the sergeants and deal with these people where I don't have to like impress pop culture, but really tapping into a space of like, okay, this is me. This is what I like. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do every day. This is where I want to be. And then being able to like financially like be able to like balance those things out. So you're really just able to like really open up and like figure out where you want to be and what the things you are that make you.
Yeah. And in terms of that inner work, I know you have a meditation practice. Did that start when you were there?
The meditation and stuff started prior to that. That started like in Atlanta. Definitely after rap and stuff though. That started with like the Ram Dass and stuff like that, listening to the Alan Watts, all the things of that nature. Those things are like, that's just core teachings, right? Living in LA, meditating like crazy. There was a book called Buddhism for Busy People that really just like locked me in, and then Krishnamurti, those guys, and just like meditating to the point of like, oh shit, like I should probably chill. You know what I mean? I should probably kick it, you know? Play with the thought of going to India. It's just like it's just this rampant thing, you know what I mean? And that when you start to tap into it, it's a rabbit hole, you know, because you really get to sit with you. And a lot of times you don't get to sit with you because you wake up and then it's like, oh, let me check my Instagram, let me do this. Or it's like, I got to get to work, or whatever is kind of calling you, and you're not listening to the voice inside that's like calling you to just like go within.
What changed in terms of your daily routine when you went down the rabbit hole? Like, what did you stop doing maybe that you used to do when you woke up in the morning?
You know what? I can't attain that. I can't like, there wasn't, see, now we're going to jump to a whole nother thing, right? It wasn't acid that made me stop doing things. It wasn't meditating that made me stop doing things. I think that those things do have profound slight pushes in my behavior or how I care about things, or look at things. Meditating every day is extremely important. I think everyone should do it. I don't think everyone should do acid every day. Probably not. But what I'm saying is, with meditation, you know, you find that balance within your day. I think it's an incredible way to start your day. It's just like exercising or whatever it may be, right? It's just this healthy thing to do that gives you this space through the day, right? Because we're just living moment to moment.
Yeah.
the thing that stopped me from doing things and got me to a place of really like basically a kick in my ass was ayahuasca. That was the kick in my ass that was like, stop doing that. Don't treat people like that. Don't fucking, you know what I mean? Like,
what about the trip made that the case?
It's that effective. It's just that strong of a medicine that it's like, it brings it down on you. You know what I mean? It's like, it comes to you, it shows you love. Mother Aya is going to show you love. She's like someone explained it to me like this, and I want to explain it to you like that, right? Because it's just that good of an analogy, I feel like. You get to school and you're like, damn, this teacher is strict as hell. Fuck this teacher. Then it's time, like at the end of the school year, you're like, oh shit.
She was
Motherfucker
right.
knew what the fuck she was talking about. I know all this shit. You know what I mean? Like, yo hablo español shit. Like, you're like, damn, I'm doing it. Like, you're out there living and like really understanding like why that teacher was the way she was, whatever it was. And then at the end of the day, you're like, oh, that teacher's cool. You know? Because that's what you want. That's what you want out of your life. You want to be learning. You want to be being pushed forward in these incredible ways. So you're not stuck, right? You're talking about like being a rapper. It's like, oh, every 6 months midlife crisis type shit. It's like, yeah, like we should all be checking ourselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At some point, right? You know what I mean? Whatever it may be for you, like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, whatever it is, we all have to check in with ourselves and figure out like, hey, am I being stagnant in these ways? Like, what is it about me that maybe I can change? Or what is it about, you know, my daily routine, whatever it may be, that can bring out the better version of me? Because there's always a better version of you somewhere hiding in there. Even when you reach that high level, like you definitely have more to give.
There's a lot of conversation, there has been, in terms of hip hop about drugs, obviously. And it seems in one way or another, they've always been synonymous, especially, obviously, weed. How do you ride the line in terms of doing psychedelics when you know that they are an entryway, a portal into, a different realm, and not want to stay there, right? Not make it, not become abusive.
Yeah. For one, I don't know them to be addictive. It's not so, you know what I mean? I think it's a space of like, you do it and you gotta step back and self-reflect. Some people do it for fun. It's never been a fun thing for me. Every time I've done acid or shrooms or anything like that, it's always been in nature. I'm outside, I'm chilling. I'm not like at a concert or at a party or something like that. Like, you know, I can't pretend like I wasn't looking for something or feeling something or being like, all right, cool, right? You know, and I always felt like I knew when it was time to like maybe like do it again or experiment again, or when it's time to like, all right, I'm cool altogether. Like, I'm not doing that anymore or whatever it is. It's not knowing what you're looking for, but listening enough, I guess, on your journey to be like, all right, cool. Like, this is good for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think there's much that we can do forever, let alone should be doing forever or all the time or whatever it is. You know, I think everything with balance, everything in balance. Right?
Yeah. And so you, through all of that, you slow down. You're building this very, what can I think of the word? Deliberate life, right? That you created.
Sheesh. That's good to know that someone views it as that.
Well,
it's like, I feel like we're all guided. I'll say that. So yeah, we're
sure.
guided.
But there are decisions that you make. There are decisions where you're like, okay, I'm now doing this, not doing this anymore, all those sort of things. So I say that.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and a lot of it has to do with like with these moments, as well as like just being aware and being in your moments, right? Yeah. Like, yo, wait, like this is good. These people rock with me. This is where the love is coming from. This is where this is at. You know what I mean? And like, kind of, for lack of a better term, like hedging your bets, right? Like,
yeah. But what made you not stay there? Why not just say, Hawaii, this is the life for me. This is the speed. This is everything that needs to be. You end up coming back.
Because I'm watching everything that's going on around me, right? It's like, you know, when you're watching everything that's going around you, it's like you're looking at the good, you're looking at the bad, you're looking at what's happening. Not to say like anything bad happened in Hawaii, but it was like, oh, like this chapter is closing.
Okay.
You know, and when you see that chapter closing, it's like, oh, where do we go next? You know, and like I was studying, I was going to school for like information security systems and like computer programming, just because being in San Francisco has that type of influence on you. You know what I mean? When you're in a community where people are like getting real money and they're sharing real ideas and they're super creative, which is a place that I'm familiar with. You know, rap is the same thing, right? People are sharing these great ideas, fucking super creative people, and people making like really dope money. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm taking all these things as I'm traveling and moving along, like what is essentially my little story or whatever, and like just trying to pay attention to that energy. And like with Hawaii, it just became a thing where it was like, oh, it's time to move on. And well, I took my talents out to LA.
And then you find yourself somewhere down the line, not too far, finally entering into the startup world. At Instacart.
Yeah, like, well, the Instacart thing it came from, I was like helpful with like a lot of sound stuff with those guys. I helped with some marketing campaigns. Like, it was really great space. Like my boy Zane, shout out to Zane. He's like he's at the forefront of that, right? He was like one of the first like 8 employees or something like that. He designed the logo, designed the bag. He was like just there, and you know, he was extremely influential in like helping me like begin to view things in another way in space. You know, a big thing for me when I left music as well was like for me to understand marketing. Like I was like, I didn't understand like what the hell is marketing. I never went to school for marketing. I didn't get it. You know what I mean? Like what it was, like why things were patterned the way they were patterned and moved the way they move, and like being out in SF, and then like being out in SF like really gave me those tools, and being with Zane, right? Like learning about typography and all these different levels of design and shit like that.
Were there any immediate parallels when you started in that space where you were where it wasn't so much that you didn't already know it because having been in the music industry for a minute, but you just didn't necessarily have the definition for it or the exact, like, where you're like, oh yeah, I know that because that's what we do when we do XYZ.
You know what? Like things like when it came to, once it like got started, once it was all put together, right? Like, cause you're doing things, you got merch, you got all these things. And then it's about like, you have to move your employees, right? Like a lot of people aren't doing the most exciting thing or whatever it is that they want to do with their lives. Some people aren't working in whatever it may be, the marijuana industry, or working in music or whatever it is. Some people are just building software for you to like upload this, or like SEO or whatever it is. And like people are finding ways to excite people and make their team feel like they're doing things that are impactful and like making a stamp on the world, right? And I think that with music, like there's that level of shit, right? It's like we are doing something exciting. People love music and all that, but it's very important to like be delivering a message. You know what I mean? Whatever your message may be, or sometimes just delivering an energy or a spirit that's like moving and pushing people in a certain direction or whatever, right? And when you do those things, you know what I mean? You got to be on point with them. Your timing's got to be right with whatever product it is, whatever you guys are doing. So there are some parallels there for sure.
Yeah, I always tell people, especially young artists, that your job is to become a cult leader.
Yeah.
You know, like in the best case scenario, you become a cult leader. You figure out a mission statement and effective things to stand on, and then you can build an entire world around what that is. And oftentimes in other businesses, especially mission based businesses, that's the same exact point, right?
For sure, man. We watch Wiz build it off of good weed, Levi's, and Chucks. You know what I mean? Like you can, like you say things enough. You know what I mean? People, they learn to love them and they'll get behind them for sure.
Yeah, and then that brand can go anywhere. Like we were talking about with Wiz, you can sell anything.
Yeah,
Taylor Gang can sell anything.
That word cult, man, culture, man. It's all going around.
Oh, look at you dropping the bars. And then from Instacart, you end up where you are currently now.
Yeah.
What is your official position at Grailed?
So, director of influencer marketing.
Okay. And for the people that don't know what Grailed is, because they need to be on the app, what is the app actually do?
It's a peer-to-peer marketplace for men's fashion.
So if you're trying to get some Off-White or some Supreme stuff.
That's right. Imagine eBay, but if it was just fly as fuck. And you couldn't auction. There's no auctioning. It's just you're going in, you're buying it. Everybody's got their own like little store, you know what I mean? So you got anything at the house, you're like, oh, you want to get rid of it, whatever it is, that's how you move.
And as an observer, what's been interesting is that while it may sound like you were moving further and further away from the industry, you are almost now plopped right back in it.
Oh, 100%. Just a different aspect, right? Like being able to work with like my brother G-Eazy, working with Future, many other people. You know, it's just like, hey, I'm back in it, but just in a different aspect. You know what I mean? It's like I understand the artist's mind. I understand what's going to make an artist move. You know what I mean? Sometimes monetarily, sometimes it's not monetarily. Sometimes, you know what I mean? It's like it's all just a sense of understanding that. And as hip hop industry, our industry gets bigger, you know what I mean? Like we become bigger stakeholders when you understand your culture, right? Like you can go to school for so many things. Like I think anybody can like open a book if they have focus and have that level of and attain a degree, right? And attain like a high level degree, right? And like you get that education, that's incredible. I think only few can maneuver the streets and kind of like gain those street smarts and really know how to like keep themselves out of harm's way while navigating hip hop in a space which it wasn't even that crazy when we were coming up in it, but it still had like it still was kind of crazy, you know, which I'm sure it still is now. Kids scamming and shit, there's all types of crazy. They got Dracos, bro. You had no Dracos. Shit's crazy. So like literally, you know, just navigating our world and our space is it's not easy, you know. It's not easy.
Yeah. Now that you are kind of like the hip hop, the culture's figurehead at at some place that isn't inherently a part of the culture, do you have the responsibility that like whenever you go in to pitch something, whenever you go in to try to set up something, that you are speaking not just as a director of influencer partnerships, but also as a part of the culture, and not trying and making sure that whatever happens there is properly, you're just doing right by.
Yeah, for sure, yo, for sure. Like, not to speak on anything specifically, but yeah, there have been moments where I felt the need to defend the culture, not defend, but just to uplift the culture so they could see it in the light that I see it in. You know what I mean? And also just making sure that we're always respecting it. Yeah. We're always respecting it. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, like all this stuff, man, like if you're working with hip hop, you have to know why you're working with hip hop, right? And it's always, as candy and pop and Macarena as it is currently, it's like it's still for the streets, and the streets can shift it and move it. At any point, the streets want to shift it and move it, and you want to be paying homage to it. You want to be paying attention to it, and you just want to be respecting it, because there's so many people you're eating off of it. You're eating off of something that is very far from a lot of people's understanding, or you know what I mean. Like even sometimes your core consumer may not know this XYZ, but like. Streetwear is the biggest thing. That's from rappers and skateboarders, bro. Yeah. Period, point blank. So we always gotta pay respect, and that's the street as it gets. So you know what I mean. Besides dope boys and shit, but it's like they a part of it too. So you gotta pay homage and like just show that love and respect. And I try to bring that into the office whenever I go into the office and when we're doing these deals, and making sure everybody feels the love and feels respected and knows that we come from a genuine place.
No, that's amazing. And looking back now, because I just realized it, to a decade ago, to the XXL cover, to that version of you, the version who made Gone. How do you look back on that era?
There was a time where I would look back and I'd be kind of embarrassed. Right? But somebody told me, it was like, yo, but you never did know. A lot of people did whack shit, and like they did really corny whack shit, but you did dope shit, and then you like went on to do doper shit, like being spiritual and like being able to like say that you're like vested in a startup and you're doing these different things. It's like, it's awesome to hear. It's really, really awesome to hear. And now when I look back, I don't really feel any kind of way. You know what I mean? I just think that it's the past. It was an awesome part of my journey. And the journey continues, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And speaking of the journey continuing, we're going to circle back to the question at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
What have you learned from hip hop that you use in your everyday life? It could be anything. It could be spiritually, it could be as a son, it could be in the workplace, it could be anything.
That you can only win by being yourself. Like that's how you truly fucking win in hip hop, by being yourself, to the point where it's just like unapologetically yourself. And I think that's what success is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's it.
Yeah, self-awareness, self-realization, like that's like those big goals, you know?
I can dig
That's
it.
when you start really attracting that abundance and the things that I think, you know, you deserve.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man, for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
No problem. Think like a rapper.
Yeah, thinking like a rapper.
Once again, I'd like to thank Donnis for taking the time, sharing his story with us. You can follow him on Instagram and Twitter at Ladonnis Crump, LADONNISCRUMP. And you can also follow me on everything at GoDouble, GODOUBLE0. And if you can, support the Patreon, patreon.com/GoDouble. Think like a rapper.